In this video I'm going to give you 6 tips on how to achieve a new PB in whatever kind of distance you want to run. So whether you're looking to have a new 5k PB, 10k, up to the marathon, these tips will all be relevant. So tip number 1 is going to be that you shouldn't expect a new PB every time you go out and run your 5k or whatever distance that you're doing. That's because it's not sustainable to do that, and if you're doing that you're probably just running the same distance every time and not changing up your training. So what you want to do is mix things up a little bit. So make sure when you're going out for your runs that there's a purpose behind what you're doing, and that again you're not expecting a new PB in this run. Sometimes a PB might just come out of the blue, but a lot of the time it's based on a solid foundation of training, and I'm going to give you a few tips along the way now which can help you to create that foundation. Those tips are going to include mixing up your training, which is kind of like this first point, and again just get in your head that not every run has to be about a PB. You can be improving without actually setting a new PB. The second tip I'm going to give is that in your training runs you want to be running some segments at faster than your target pace. So for example, if you want to run a sub 20 minute 5k, what you need to do is for the actual 5k you're going to need to target a pace of about 4 minutes per kilometer or 6 minutes 26 per mile. So that means in your training you want to run a little bit faster than this, but you're not going to be running a full 5k segment. You're going to, for example, run maybe 1k at 3:55 and fit that into your run, and then over time you can build that up so that you're doing multiple segments of that same distance at that same speed, and then when it comes to running your PB you should be able to be more capable of running at 4 minutes per kilometer or at 6 minutes 26 per mile. So you don't need to be running extremely fast compared to your target pace, a few seconds quicker, and it'll just make the body more efficient at running the slower pace, which is going to be your target race pace, for example 4 minutes a kilometer. So this doesn't mean that you just have to run 1 kilometer at 3:55 and then that's your run over. You can do a longer run than that, but just at some point within that run we're going to create a shorter segment and we're going to run at the faster speed during that segment. So that moves me on to the third tip, which is to introduce intervals into your training. So this is similar to the previous point I've just made, but this is going to be you're running at a set distance, at a set speed, or for a set amount of time. It doesn't always have to be distance. So the point of this is just to bring a bit of structure into adding those faster than goal pace runs. So for example, what you might want to do is to run 1 kilometer at a comfortable pace, which is a bit slower than your goal pace, and then run 1 kilometer at slightly faster than your goal pace. And you might do this, depends on the race distance you're doing, but you might do this maybe twice for a 5k run, and you might build it up to 3 times. If you're doing a longer run you can obviously do more, but again you build it up over time. It doesn't always have to be distance, as I said, so if you want to do it by time, that's totally okay as well. For example, what you might do is sets of 3 minutes at or above your target pace. I would suggest above, but you could also do that at your target pace. It just probably is a little bit less efficient and makes it a bit more difficult to reach the PB, but it's fine if that's what you can manage. If you're struggling to complete these intervals at these speeds, it probably means your goal is either too ambitious or you might just need more time than you previously thought to be able to actually achieve your PB. But initially you might only be doing a couple of sets of intervals. Again, depends on what distance you're doing, but say if you're doing for a 5k, what you might want to do is start off with 4 intervals of half a kilometer. You might increase that then to 5, 6, 7, 8 intervals, and then you might increase each interval's distance. If you're doing it over time, again same thing. You might start off with 2 or 3 times 3 minutes, and then you might increase that to 5, 6 times 3 minutes. If you're trying to run a sub 25k, if you can do 6 sets of 3 minutes, you're running for 18 odd minutes, and you have a good chance then of achieving it. So like with everything else, intervals, we're building them up over time, and they kind of complement alongside the fitness training that you're going to do, which I'm going to touch on next. So tip number 4 is that in your training for your PB, what you want to do is run longer than what your race distance is. So I've put race in little quotes there because you may not necessarily be doing a race, you may just be doing your own set distance, but what we're going to call the day that you're aiming to set your PB, we'll call that race day, whether it's a race or not. So the other training that I've talked about has kind of worked on speed a bit. This is going to work on your overall fitness, which is what kind of creates the base we call to be able to run that speed for a sustained amount of time. So for these runs we're going to run a good bit slower than what our goal pace is. So if your goal pace is 4 minutes a kilometer, you might run a 5 minutes a kilometer, you might run a 5:30 a kilometer, and obviously if people are running slower than that, again it's all just relative, so you just whatever your speed is, it could be 6 minutes a kilometre goal pace, you might then run 7 minutes a kilometre, 7:30 a kilometre. So it's all relative to what your actual goal is. You don't need to worry about trying to hit some goal that I'm saying a time for. That's just, people typically say 20 minutes for 5k, so is an aim of theirs, so that's why I'm just using that as an example. So when we're running a bit slower, what we're able to do then is to run for longer than we previously thought, and I've done previous videos on this, zone 2 running and my tips to begin running, so you can see them on my channel. But in this case, if we're training for a 5k, what you're going to want to do is these slower runs, and you're going to want to be hitting maybe 10, 15k, maybe even more if you feel capable of it, if you're really taking it easy. What these are going to do is just build your overall base fitness, the kind of tendons in your legs, all these little things that I've talked about in my zone 2 running video, and it's just going to make it easier to then sustain those faster paces for longer. So it might seem counterintuitive to be running slower and to be running for longer than you plan to, but if your pure goal is to run PBs rather than to just run a set distance, this is kind of the best way to do it and the most efficient. You'll find that people who go out and run, say example, a 5k every 3 or 4 days, and they're kind of permanently hoping to run a PB, it might happen every now and then, but it's not a sustainable way to do it, and it's kind of just look at the day and how you're feeling on the day, whereas this should help you over the course of, for example, a 6-week plan maybe. You should, by the end of that plan, be able to run a faster 5k than you began with by using this method. So I've mainly been talking about maybe 5k's in this video, but you might be looking at 10k half marathon. For both of them, I'd recommend running further than your goal distance. When it comes to the marathon, it's kind of generally perceived that that's probably too long of a distance to be aiming to run further than in training. So obviously when you're running slower, it will be more possible to do it, but it probably just creates such a load on the body that it's probably outweighing a risk of injury compared to the benefits that you might gain from it. So with marathon training, it is a little bit different. You wouldn't run quite as far, but the final few kilometers that you're maybe missing in training, the rest that you would have before a race day for this would kind of make up for it. And also there's like adrenaline on the day and stuff like that, and if you're fueled well, you will have enough energy to complete those last few kilometers. It's not that big a deal. So when it comes to 10k half marathon, we're able to run further than that in training without creating too much of an injury risk and a stress load on our body, so that's why it's recommended to do it for those events. Again, you can probably get away without running further than that, but the most efficient and most ideal way is by doing it. So for a 10k, you might even run up to a half marathon on these longer, easier runs. For a half marathon, you might be running maybe somewhere between 25 to 30k. It's all kind of based on how you feel in your body, and you would maybe base it on the runs as well. If you're really starting to struggle towards the end of them, you maybe haven't fueled right, or you maybe just don't have the overall fitness to keep going for that long, so you would just build it up over time. So you don't immediately go, if you're training for a half marathon, you don't immediately go and run a 25 km run. If you're doing 10k, you might be able to run 20k just out of nowhere, but you ideally just build it up over time. Chances are, if you are trying to set a 10k PB, you've obviously run a bit before, so you may be able to do the slower run and hit the half. When it comes to doing a half, it's again, if you're already trained to do it, yeah, you're more likely to be able to run further than that. But it's not absolutely essential to go straight into running further than that. You can build it up over time. So onto the fifth tip I'm going to give you, which is, if you can incorporate some strength training outside of your running hours. So this would be in the gym or at home. It doesn't have to be in the gym. It's stuff you can easily do at home. So again, I've got videos on my channel of stuff I do for my knees, my ankles, my tendons, Achilles, stuff like that. Stuff like pogos, which is essentially just kind of jumping around the different variations. Single leg exercises are really good, so single leg squats, things like that. Box steps, things like that. So it's stuff you can easily do at home. All you just need is, a step to step up onto for box. So things like that, easily done at home, and it's something that will just elevate your running, but at the same time it reduces the risk of injury. So you're putting an extra load in your body, you're doing further distances than you're maybe used to, so by doing this, it just prepares your tendons to basically take on the extra load. And that's how tendons strengthen. So tendons aren't really the same as a muscle, they don't just get stronger. What you need is to actually stress them, and that's how they improve. And by improving them, what we're doing is reducing our risk of injury, and therefore increasing the chance that we're going to be able to run consistently, which is key to running your PB. So that leads me nicely onto the last tip, which is that consistency is key to running your new PB. Like I've said earlier, if you just run the same distance every run, you may end up with a PB at some point, but it's not the most efficient way to do it. If you go out and follow a training plan or follow a structured set of runs, you've a much better chance of doing it. And in order to do that, consistency is how you basically follow that structured plan. So by doing that, you're going to follow a different variation of runs, and you're going to build it up over time, reducing the chance of injury out of nowhere and just increasing the efficiency of your overall training, which ultimately is going to lead you to a better chance of hitting your PB or goal target time. So if you just run once or twice a week and it's different days every week, that's still okay. But if you just run once every 2 weeks, you're never going to build up the consistency to be basically able to set a new PB at whatever target date you've set. With running, it's something that you can build the fitness up over time, and you will lose it only slowly. You won't lose all your fitness immediately, but if you don't run for 2 weeks, you're going to be starting to lose that fitness, and you're just going to be picking up where you started off. So again, if you just set a structure and follow it and be consistent with it, it gives you the best chance to just keep on increasing your fitness and therefore to hit whatever goal you're trying to hit. So there are other tips I could probably give, but I think those are 6 important ones to give. And yeah, I hope if anybody has listened the whole way through, they found those tips helpful, and that if they are trying to hit a PB, that following those tips might work. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or is confused by any of that, let me know and I'll try help you out. So thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed.